Hallo und herzlich willkommen und einen wunderschönen guten Morgen hier zur Pressekonferenz der ITSA Expo&Congress 2025.
Hello, and welcome, and a very good morning here to the ITSA Expo&Congress 2025 press conference. My name is Thimo Holst. I've had the great pleasure since last year. This is my first event and the first time I've had the opportunity to speak to you here. I am very pleased. I have a double role today, so to speak. I'll be guiding you through the press conference a little, but I'll also give you an overview of the event that's coming up over the next 3 days, which I hope will be a lot of fun. Before we get into that, is the almost more enjoyable part coming up, namely the introduction of my co-panelists? And I'll do that now. I'll have to take a look from the notes. Let's start on the outside, with Dr. Joanna Świątkowska. She is the Secretary General of Expo-European Cybersecurity Organization, and also here for the first time this year. She will have to leave in the meantime to attend her next appointment.
Neben mir auch Claudia Plattner, wahrscheinlich bestens bekannt, Präsidentin des BSI, Bundesamt für Sicherheit in der Informationstechnik.
So please don't be surprised. Next to me is Claudia Plattner, probably best known as President of the BSI, Federal Office for Information Security for the first time with DR.
Und ebenfalls mit dabei, wahrscheinlich auch bestens bekannt, Professor Dr. Norbert Pohlmann, Vorstandsvorsitzender vom Bundesverband IT.
Ralf Wintergerst, President of BITCOM together with the BSI. BITCOM is the conceptual sponsor of the event and also present, probably also very well known, Professor Dr. Norbert Pohlmann, Chairman of the Board of the German IT Security. Teletust is a premium partner of ITSA. Welcome. I'm really looking forward to the press conference here together. I'm good to see you all here. So, and then a few organizational notes for the press representatives. We have the opportunity to answer questions after the panelists' contributions. We'll do that in a bundle afterwards. We have also provided press materials on ETA365.com, i.e. press releases, photos, and other press services. Do you also like to look around online? You can find further materials there. If you're still missing anything from the press conference, we have a translation from German into English and from English into German. So we have a translation. If there's any international journalists among us, you can use the automated translation over there on the screen. It's a premiere for us. It is AI supported, and we hope it will deliver the same messages as in the original language. Okay, so it's
vielleicht ein bisschen in einer Steigerung von trocken zu spannend. Wir starten mal mit ein paar Zahlen.
Because Expo&Congress 2025 might be a bit of a step up from dry to exciting. Let's start with a few figures that I just got back from the event team.
Eine Rekordveranstaltung, sprich die Messe ist noch mal gewachsen.
We have a record event again this year. In other words, the trade fair has grown once again in terms of volume and the number of exhibitors compared to the previous year. In concrete terms, this means that we have a net stand area of over 23,000 square meters, and we are just under the 1,000 mark. As far as the number of exhibitors is concerned, we have just under 990 exhibitors here. Expressed as a percentage for the next 3 days, that means growth of 15%. The event has grown in size since last year. This is also very tangible, as a new exhibition hall has been added. For the first time, we have Hall 8 with us. The event has really grown by a whole hall, which of course makes us very happy as organizers. But this is also largely due to the dynamic nature of the topic and its relevance. We all probably still have the latest news reports in mind, which are still very fresh from the cyber attacks on airport systems. It certainly wasn't decisive that the trade fair has grown even bigger. It's too short notice for that, but it certainly was a tangible example of what is happening in this area and how relevant the topic is simply becoming. And it shows that the event is growing in size and dynamism year after year. We very much hope that this will also be reflected in the visitor numbers. Of course, it's still too early for that. We're just on the first day, The most we can do is compare the pre-registrations to see how many visitors have announced their intention to come. And here, too, we are assuming that the event will be even better attended than last year. Logically, the final figures will only be available on the third day. The exhibition is accompanied by a very diverse supporting program. On the one hand, we have 6 forums in the exhibition halls, and over 400 presentations will take place in these forums over the next 3 days. Some of them will be given by exhibitors, who will be able to present themselves there again in a separate form. But some will also be in ITSA Insights at ITSA format, product-neutral presentations that simply serve to impart knowledge. The Congress at ITSA started yesterday. This is not about shorter presentations and the masses, but about half-day and full-day open and closed workshops and programs. These already started yesterday. This year's event is also very popular again. I would like to pick out 23 highlights from the program that may also be of interest to you for a separate visit. On the last day of the trade fair, we are following the tradition of offering a special keynote at 12 o'clock noon. Every year, we try to take a macro look at the topic, not in technical detail, to remain, but to really see the big picture. And this year we have been able to win over a colleague from Switzerland. Dr. Jean-Marc Wrigley, he is at the Geneva Center for Security Research, and he will take a look at technology as a geopolitical weapon, probably a rather gloomy lecture. We were warned, we said do it anyway. Unfortunately, it fits in with the times, and hopefully it will be exciting. We have a new format in our program called CIO Match. This is an exclusive program for C-levels, who will spend another day working on solutions at C-level in a separate setting. This is also new to the program. We are very pleased that we are including it for the first time this year. We have also made a small innovation by conducting a survey together with a market research company from Nuremberg among around 1,000 SMEs across Europe in order to highlight an area of tension. What is the self-perception of SMEs? Am I well equipped in the area of cybersecurity, and to show the opposite picture by means of corresponding questions? Is it really them? The results will also be presented in the supporting program on the third day of the trade fair. And we are already looking forward to seeing what the market researchers have discovered there. I suspect there is a certain tension. And finally, another highlight. Also following a tradition, nothing new, but well established. Remember here, we once again have the Athene Award, a startup award. We present it year after year. We had 28 applicants for the first time this year, so the number is also increasing. We can also see from our startup areas in the exhibition halls that there is simply an incredible amount happening, and we would like to support this on the event side. We do this through the startup areas that we have in the halls, plus the presentation of the Startup Award together with the IT, SACHRHTSCL, USDR Regensburg, and the Athene Research Institute. You're also cordially invited to attend the award ceremony on the second day of the fair. And yes, I at least am really looking forward to it. That's almost it for me. Last but not least, perhaps an outlook on ITSA as we perceive it at the moment. My fellow panelists can certainly explain this in more detail than I can. There's an incredible dynamic and relevance and necessity in the area of IT security and cybersecurity was, and what we notice is that the view
Anwendungsbereiche aus der Privatwirtschaft und Industrie, die vielleicht auf der ITSA schon länger vertreten sind, werden ergänzt Kritis, sicherlich auch kein neues Thema mehr, kritische Infrastruktur, bis hin zum Thema nationale Sicherheit und auch Cybersecurity in einem militärischen Kontext.
The focus is less on the individual technologies and more on the areas of application. Areas of application from the private sector and industry, which have perhaps been represented at ITSA for some time, are being supplemented by CRETIs, certainly not a new topic either. More critical infrastructure through to the topic of national security and cybersecurity in a military context. The different areas of application reach us here at the event. We also try to address these. We will continue to take them into account conceptually over the next few years and reflect them here, in order to provide as broad a picture as possible of the topic of IT security here at the event. Furthermore, and this is why I am particularly pleased to be able to hand over to Joanna. Do we have the perception that we are currently experiencing a great momentum in favor of Europe, especially in the area of cybersecurity? We would also like to give this a face here at ITSE. And yes, I hope it's an elegant transition to Joanna. It will be Kafka who speaks first now, because she has to go straight away, as I said. And us. Perhaps she can give us a few more impressions from a European perspective.
I'm truly sorry because I'm most likely the reason why we do need to have this translation. Apologies for that. I will do my best to fix it for the next year's editions. And I think that basically the AI-driven system passed the test with my last name being basically presented here on the screen, almost close to the original version. So, jokes aside, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Joanna Świątkowska. I'm the Secretary General at EXO. EXO stands for European Cybersecurity Organization. So yes, indeed, today I will try my best to present a couple of thoughts and observations related to cybersecurity from the European point of view, from the strategic point of view, if you will. But before I will say that, I would like to commend the organizers for this wonderful event. And I'm very proud to say that today we signed a letter of intent for the strong collaboration between our organization, EXO, and ITSA. So we hope that in the years to come, we'll bring more and more European cybersecurity communities to this amazing event. But ladies and gentlemen, and I will try to be brief with my opening remarks, the key message that I would like to convey today is the fact that, in my view, whenever we are talking about cybersecurity these days, we should make it very clear that this is no longer only a technical challenge. It will be forever a technical challenge, but it's no longer only that. I would say that cybersecurity is one of the most pressing strategic challenges that we face, both from the perspective of the current geopolitics and everything that comes with that, but also when it comes to our, let's say, economic well-being. So a few words about those two perspectives, if I may. I think it's needless to say and explain that basically cybersecurity became absolutely an integral part of our national and international security, and that is being illustrated perfectly by what is happening, among the others, in Ukraine. It's clear to all of us that cyber attacks and cyber threats became an integral part of the kinetic warfare. And unfortunately, you don't need to be directly engaged in the battlefield, in a kinetic conflict, to suffer from from that situation. Let me give you two examples and basically two dimensions why I believe that this is something that should be alarming for the entire European cybersecurity ecosystem. One reason why I believe that this is absolutely fundamental is the fact that due to the supply chain interdependencies, basically we are exposed to the cascading effects of cyber attacks that are taking place increasingly in the context of the geopolitical tense situation in Europe. I mean, we are in Germany. Let me give you just an example. You might remember a cyber attack on Viasat satellite communication in Ukraine. Basically, it affected space-based assets used for command and control of wind turbines in Germany. I believe that around 5,000, 6,000 turbines here in this country were affected and basically crippled for some time, simply because they were interlinked with some other systems directly attacked in Ukraine. So again, I think that we are basically sitting on the same boat, if you will, and we need to make sure that our cyber defense, our cyber posture, basically reflects the tense geopolitical situation that we live in. Second element related to that, again, unrelated with the supply chain interdependencies, but still speaking about the possible cascading effects and collateral damage, because of the fact that the war is taking place on our continent, our countries which are supporting Ukraine in this conflict, they are basically exposed to the hybrid threats that are more and more using cyber attacks to basically put political pressure on our nations. Just to give you an example, I'm Polish. Very recently, our Vice Prime Minister revealed that our critical infrastructure in my country is under tremendous pressure from cyber threats. We are facing around 4,000 cyber attacks daily and attempts to basically cripple our infrastructure, and it is to a large extent related with what is happening at the geopolitical scene. So we need to see cybersecurity as an integral and fundamental element of our national security. Second element, and again I will try to be brief, is related with the economic situation. As you know very well, Europe is at a, I would say, pivotal point when it comes to our economic well-being. That was very well explained in Mario Draghi's report. We do have some issues related with competitiveness. We do have some issues related with, let's say, our role in the technological race, and it's strictly related with cybersecurity in my view. Simply because on the one hand side, cybersecurity serves as absolutely very promising market segment that offers tremendous opportunities for investments, for growth, and etc. Currently, if I'm not mistaken, in Europe, compound annual growth rate related with the cybersecurity market is at the level of 10%, which is a very good and solid number. At the same time, cybersecurity should be seen as an enabler for the digital transformation, which is directly linked with our economic development. So if the situation is so good, why is not perfect, and why we are not fulfilling our, let's say, great potential? Well, several reasons. I will just mention briefly two of them. One, we have a tremendous problem with the investment in Europe when it comes to cybersecurity. I'm speaking mainly about high-risk investment gap that exists on our continent. European Investment Bank, together with among the other EXO, estimated in 2022 that there is an investment gap at the level of 1.75 billion euro annually. And unfortunately, that results in the fact that our cybersecurity market is slightly less mature in comparison to our other regions and some of our other partners. Our VCs specializing in cybersecurity are on average 3 times smaller in comparison to the colleagues coming, for instance, from the US or Israel. And the tickets, investment tickets, are 3 to 4 times, again, smaller in comparison to other regions. What is the result of that? European companies, when they want to grow, when they want to scale, unfortunately, they leave our continent. So, and numbers are quite brutal. Only 0.5% of European startups basically manage to go to the scale-up phase. In cybersecurity precisely, 70% of our startups cannot advance from pre-seed, seed investment round to Series A. And that leads to the brain drain, that leads to the fact that our most innovative companies unfortunately leave our continent and go elsewhere. The last figure that I'm going to give is the fact that we calculated that in 2024, 49% of mergers and acquisitions in Europe, of course related with cybersecurity companies, were made by non-European players. So that the key message that I would like to convey is that we do not have problem with talents, we do not have problems with the most innovative solutions, we have great products, but we tend to lose them when they want to grow. And it's the matter of investment, but it's also a matter of our choices. I think that unfortunately in Europe, we do not buy enough and we do not choose enough our own solutions, meaning that we do not give a chance to our own companies to grow on our own continent. So to sum it up, here at ITSA, I think that we are in a perfect place to discuss those challenges. We have not only the key decision makers and stakeholders that are making every single day the key decisions to grow Europe strong, but we also have great exposition full of wonderful solutions that basically are needed for our digital strategic autonomy. With that, thank you so much for allowing me to speak, and I'm super happy to answer all the questions that you might have at some point. The only remark, and I'm absolutely sorry for that, I will have to leave sharp at noon to catch the flight, but you have my word and promise that I will do my best to be back next year. And again, my German is not gonna be good enough, so that was a joke, but I will do my best to improve. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Vielen Dank. Als nächsten Wortbeitrag freue ich mich auf Claudia Plattner.
I look forward to Claudia Plattner from the BSI speaking next. Thank you very much. Sorry, I just left.
So, ja, Dankeschön, sehr lieb. Ist nicht meine erste Pressekonferenz hier, ist, glaube ich, die dritte jetzt sogar schon. Ich weiß gar nicht.
We should have done this before, so thank you very much. It's not my first press conference. I think this is the third one. It already is. I don't know exactly. I'm so pleased to be here again.
So, ich werde noch ein bisschen Kontext setzen, den müsst ihr euch noch anhören, aber wenn wir den dann durch haben, habe ich auch ein paar
So a
News.
big thank you again to ITSA, to the presenter who has already announced us here, and I brought something with me. Someone add a bit of context. You'll have to listen to it, but once we've done that, I'll have some news. So stay with us, I have a little bit to tell. As I said, I like to start setting the context a bit more.
Ganz wichtig, dass wir hier sind. Hier passiert ganz viel. Und für uns definitiv der Punkt, wo die zentrale
ITSA is definitely one of the absolute highlights of the year for the BSI, and for me too. It's very, very important that we're here. A lot happens here, and for us, it is definitely the point where the key players in cybersecurity and therefore also digitalization come together. So it's very important in that respect. And I also spoke about this topic here last year and the year before last. We need to build the Cyber Nation Germany. We talked about it. I can relate to the last year, even gave you a piece of paper with a few topics on it. You may remember them too, and I would like to. This year, above all, I want to take a look at it. What have we achieved? How have we got on? And that is also. It is extremely important that we move forward. A look at the IT security situation speaks volumes at this point, and without wanting to get ahead of you, I'm sure you'll have some figures for us, Ralf. Nevertheless, I can already say, without giving too much away, that they are not pretty, and that's putting it very mildly. In the current and possibly future geopolitical situation, we find ourselves in a field of tension in which we are exposed to truly extraordinary threats in the area of cybercrime. I'm just saying BR, and I was indeed a victim myself, and I was certainly not alone. When it comes to the fact that we may also have to manage to do it again more quickly, together again more quickly, and also achieve a normalization, then we still have a long way to go, and that's just one example. There are countless examples. We have the issue of cyber espionage, which is causing more and more damage. We have the issue of cyber sabotage, which in the tense geopolitical situation is of course also causing us increasing concern, because it simply points to hybrid conflicts. For me, one thing is clear, technology is the key to application, which is precisely this point, but we also have to actually. We need to get to the root of the problem, which is why for me the key also means secure digital products to a certain extent. Secure IT security products, number 2, various things, and of course the question and the much vaunted question of digital sovereignty. We also need to ask ourselves what part of the tech stack we want to occupy and control in Germany, and what part of the tech stack we can possibly supply to the whole world. And that is, of course, a question that also arises perfectly with ITSA. And I'm absolutely convinced of that, and we can see that when we walk through the halls here. We are doing particularly well when it comes to cybersecurity. We have to use this expertise, and that is why we are also looking to exchange ideas and network with German and European retailers and manufacturers who really have a lot to offer. And we've already talked about Start UPS. I deliberately took a bit of time tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, to really take a look at a few more startups. I think it's very, very important that we also pay attention to them. I don't always get more than attention, but I do. At least that's what I want to see, where we are on the road, where we are. So that means looking at the big picture, how we get a functioning ecosystem together. That's what this is for. And that is also a very, very central topic of Cyber Nation. Do you remember the note from last year? That was a very important point. How do we get a functioning ecosystem? And we also worked on many topics there this year as the BSI, and I just like a few things. Now we're announcing that we've simply achieved them. You already know some of them. As I said, we've saved the best for last. We have called this year's Email Security Year.
Das klingt immer so altbacken, aber ganz ehrlich, E-Mails, das wächst immer noch.
We have already managed to get over 100 companies to improve their email infrastructure as part of this year of security. That always sounds so old-fashioned. But quite honestly, emails are still growing, and the number is still increasing. Yes, and it is still a very, very important means of communication. But it's built on a technology that was happy that people can now tell each other that their coffee is ready. That wasn't a certainty. We are still feeling the consequences today, but there is a remedy, and we have now persuaded many companies to make improvements in this area. Some have a corresponding campaign risk. We still have a duty to deliver, but they have promised that they will do so, and we are also looking into it. And at the end of the year, but we also have to take stock of the overall situation, and we can already say that this has been a success. We've already achieved that this year, and we're already very proud of it. So it's a step forward. The next point is also here at the event. So I actually also worked on in various events. Wie muss man das aufstellen, damit das entsprechend sicher ist? Die neue Edition ist da. Die wird im Moment in der You may know the topic of C5, catalog C5, if you've already had to deal with the topic in depth. The question for cloud companies, for cloud providers, is how to set this up so that it is appropriately secure. The new edition is here. It is also being discussed in the community at the moment. Doing that. We always do that. We put it out there, so to speak, and then see what comments come in. We've also published that, and there are now also sessions on it. We also did a check. We owed it. We've done it, and we're now discussing it so that it works well for everyone. So the next thing we have managed to do, and where we are also very proud of, is the issue of modernizing basic IT protection. The idea we have in mind is to have basic protection that is first and foremost machine readable, because that is the basic prerequisite for being able to automate it. We also need to digitize and automate cybersecurity. We have to create the basic prerequisites for this. We do this with basic IT protection. The idea is also that you basically say, okay, I am this and that company. This and this apply to me. These are the relevant topics.
Das ist die Idee dabei. Was wir jetzt fertig haben, ist im Prinzip der Stand der Technik, also sprich das Kompendium, diese Bibliothek, die es dazu gibt. Das Ganze firmiert bei uns übrigens unter dem Stichwort Grundschutz Plus.
I have a data center, so I have to include the following modules and check them off automatically. Ideally, I can actually follow up automatically and thus make life much easier at this point, so that the idea is that what we have ready now is basically the state of the art, i.e. the compendium. Incidentally, this library, which exists for this purpose, the whole thing goes under the heading of Basic Protection ++, which was once a working title, and as is the case with working titles, it has remained. We've also put a tick in the box, and what we're working on now is getting the whole thing into the IT. There's still a bit of work to be done, but we already have the state of the art. Everyone can see it. It can be discussed. We have it. Here at the trade fair in front of NES2 directive is just through the Bundesrat. Now, the final stages in the Bundestag. We hope will be passed very soon. That was also a very, very long road. As you all know, last year's coalition, which then imploded, caused yet another delay. But we are now on the right track and hope to have it completed soon. That's important for us, for BSI, and for the companies out there. We are ready. In a moment, what is Gazette? Once it is set, we are also ready. We can go live, we can get started, so that's another very, very important point, and this concerns the operator's security. So all those who have to worry about how to protect their IT properly. But now, there's also something to say about product security, and as you know, there's this Cyber Resilience Act comment from the EU, and it's about ensuring a higher level of cybersecurity for products, and to ensure that only products are actually allowed on the market in Europe. This means that there will then be updates, that you can't just say, I've now published and then I don't care.
Die wir auch von unseren Produkten erwarten können, da einfach auch angelegt werden. So, und da kommt jetzt auch dann entsprechend die
If there are any vulnerabilities, then a life cycle is actually taken into account so that vulnerabilities are closed, that in principle, basic principles that we can also expect from our products are simply applied. And that's where the news comes in. The BS. I will be the responsible notifier and the National Market Surveillance Authority for the Cyber Resilience Act in Germany. We can now announce this today. It is also a big step that there is now clarity here. It may not come as a surprise to some people, as they may have already suspected this a little. But it is definitely a big step to now have this in black and white with such clarity. This means that, as the notifying authority, we as the BSI will assess and notify third-party bodies so that the IT products. We will then be able to independently test them against the requirements of the Cyber Resilience Act, and the number of products that fall under the CRA is large.
So, und dann auch als Marktüberwachungsbehörde, der zweite Teil, achten wir dann als BSI auch darauf, dass diese
You could definitely say that. And because we are also upgrading the corresponding test centers, we are also scaling up so that we have the testing capacities to be able to do this, because there will be a lot of products and you need random samples for this. And then also as a market surveillance authority. The second part is that we as the BSI also make sure that these IT products can be used and can be used without hesitation. After all, we want consumers to be able to rely on these issues to a certain extent. We then randomly test such products for cybersecurity. We ensure compliance, i.e. that the right requirements are met. And that is also part of the story. We can also impose sanctions and fines, and even withdraw product from the market. Of course, that's a big responsibility, and it's a new task, a role that we as the BSI will take on. We will definitely take it with the necessary care and seriousness. It's a big task, it's a big responsibility, and we take it very seriously. And we will tackle it with full commitment. Yes, and we will be providing information on this at our stand at ITSA. Come and visit our Speakers Corner. We look forward to seeing you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Große Neuigkeit mit dabei. Schön, dass wir die hier verkünden können.
Yes, thank you very much. There really was some big news there. It's great that we can announce it here. Now we come to DR.
Die Gemeinsamkeit, die wir beide haben, ist, dass wir das erste Mal hier oben sitzen. Ich freue mich sehr auf den Wortbeitrag und übergebe das Mikrofon.
Ralf Wintergerst, president of Bitcom. One thing we both have in common is that this is the first time we have been up here, and I am very much looking forward to speaking and handing over the microphone. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you for your colleagues. Help.
Ist für Unternehmen so wichtig, weil es damit Klarheit gibt, weil es damit Klarheit in Umsetzung gibt, auch für Zuständigkeiten. Es gibt nichts Schlimmeres, als wenn das ganz lange im Limbo ist.
Yes, but I have to pick up briefly on a point, Claudia, that you made. These responsibilities for the implementation of legislative procedures, such as the Cyber Resilience Act, are so important for companies because it gives clarity in implementation, also for responsibilities. There's nothing worse than being in limbo for a very long time, because then nobody does anything and we never make any progress. That's why we say this. But congratulations too. Good luck, yes. By the way, we've both just made a podcast. If you're interested in listening to it, it's also about cybersecurity. Before I start, I have to ask briefly which of you is from Nuremberg. Some okay. Then it's worth starting with Nuremberg. So me. I would like to talk today about some figures in the area of cyber damage to the German economy. But I'll start with Nuremberg. As Bitcom, we do quite a few studies every year and measure the whole of digital Germany. So, to speak, one study we conduct is the Smart City Index. We compare all major German cities in terms of the degree of digitalization in public administration, network expansion, and in various categories. I can tell you this. Nuremberg is one of the top 10 cities in Germany, with a soccer club in 14th place in the Bundesliga. Yes, it has reached number 8, and I have to say that Nuremberg is really getting stuck in and is also doing something about digitalization. Nuremberg is number 1 in Germany in terms of administrative digitization. So, if we now take a look at the details, we have to say that this is good by national standards, but probably not top class by international standards. So we wouldn't be at the top of the Champions League yet, and it shows the general problem that although we're doing a lot in Germany, some progress is being made in digital Germany, it's still not really enough. And enough actually brings me to my main point, which is the damage that is actually being done in digital Germany, because cybersecurity with inadequate digitalization. And if we don't combine cybersecurity with end-to-end digitalization, we will always lag behind. The amount of damage caused to the German economy.
290 Milliarden. Davon sind erstmalig über 200 Milliarden über Cyberattacken.
The damage caused by general attacks on physical infrastructure or digital infrastructure is 290 billion for the current year. For the first time, over 200 billion of this is due to cyber attacks. We also know where they come from. We also know the attack vectors. Put this figure in relation to the estimated turnover of all German companies. You arrive at around 2%. 2% calculated on turnover. 2% calculated on turnover means that this is money that is missing for innovation. Even if you calculate it all the way down in the profit and loss account of the companies, at some point, this is lost tax revenue for the state, which we need for investments. And so cybersecurity is no longer a question at all, but a business case in practical terms. Batman Sitzel, the figure of over 200 billion in estimated losses for the German economy in 2025. Esther Ecken's Society. The second finding of our economic protection study is that companies are increasingly concerned that cyber damage can pose existential risks.
Wenn sie so lahmgelegt werden, dass sie ihre Produkte nicht mehr ausliefern können. 60% sagen, sie haben Bedenken, dass Cyberschäden wirklich irreparabel sein können und die Existenz gefährden. Die Zahl ist recht hoch, die schwankt immer mal ein wenig.
Because if they're a highly specialized company, our German hidden champions, for example, and their early data, patents, engineering database are hacked and thus give others an advantage. If they're paralyzed in such a way that they can no longer deliver their products, 60% say they're concerned that cyber damage can really be irreparable and endanger their existence. The figure is quite high and always fluctuates a little, but it also shows that the perceived general threat situation has actually reached companies. Second finding, the third finding, is that German companies are investing more in cybersecurity in their own protection, in their own defenses. Rising percentage over the last few years shows that we were at 9% in 2022 from a so-called IT run operation. We have now doubled that figure to 18%. The BSI and BICM suggest that we should be at around 20%. So we're not quite on target yet. But the positive message is that there's a little more where companies are doing something. But of course, that also fits in with the perception. But it also fits in with the threat situation and the damage caused to the German economy.
Wie sich denn der deutsche IT-Sicherheitsmarkt entwickelt. Also all das, was Sie hier auf der ITSA sehen, die ganzen Anbieter, die hier sind, die knapp unter 1000 Unternehmen, die knapp 26.000 registrierten Teilnehmer, oder? Besucher, werden wir dann noch im Nachgang feststellen, zeigt ja, dass es dort einen Markt gibt. Dieser Markt ist wichtig, weil ansonsten können die Unternehmen ja gar nicht investieren. Sie brauchen ja Produkte, die sie aufbauen.
So, and now I have a figure that is completely new because we have recently measured how the German IT security market is developing, i.e. everything that you see here at SA, all the providers that are here, the just under 1,000 companies, the almost 26,000 registered participants or visitors we'll find out afterwards, shows that there's a market there. This market is important because otherwise companies would not be able to invest at all. They need products that they can build up. This one, market, it has to be said, is growing at around 10% per year. And the estimated figure for this year is 11.1 billion euros that companies are investing. So turnover for the operators, so for all the providers out there, or cost for the companies, because they invest in it. And for next year, we also see a significant increase of around 10% of the entire German market, just to pick that up. The entire German IT market, i.e. all IT hardware, IT services and telecommunication services, is growing by around 5% this year and is worth around 245 billion euros. So, it is a significant market in Germany. The cybersecurity market is a part of this, so the purchase of cybersecurity products is increasing, growing at 10% per year for this year, estimated at 11.1 billion euros. Let's put that in relation internationally at the end. So how does Germany actually stand with these investments compared to other countries? Joanna briefly mentioned earlier that Germany is investing less than proportionately. So if we look at the whole thing worldwide, the global market for cybersecurity solutions is around 212 billion euros across all countries. German. And if we take this 11.1 billion, it has a market share of around 5.3%. Growth in Germany is 10.1%, in Europe 10.9%, worldwide just over 11%. So 11.4% to be precise. And of course there are points where I say, well, it shows. When I see the damage, these more than 200 billion in cyber damages, and at the same time, the increasing number of fears that companies' existence is at risk, but then put this in relation to what we are investing in Germany, then we still have some way to go. I don't think we're entirely unaware that we need to step up our game. And this also makes it clear that cybersecurity is an overall task. So we can't look to the authorities to regulate and make things clear to us. We need companies that are prepared to invest in their own defenses, in their own protection. We also need providers, but we also need our society, our fellow citizens, because without them, the whole thing won't work. We need a general acceptance that our level of protection must increase. And that means, if I may summarize, cybersecurity. From my point of view, a business case is over 200 billion in damages, and I'm going to say 2% in the profit and loss account. It is simply worth investing in defense. We then have the money available for investment. Investment should increase so that Germany becomes a more resilient and robust location. And the third point is essentially that we have to see this as a joint task. And that's why it's also important that there are 4 of us sitting here, namely the B, SI as the responsible authority, the Bitkom representative companies, the Teletrust representative companies. But the European perspective can never be forgotten. As Germany, we are only there with Europe and not just on our own. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank. Und freue mich auch auf den nächsten Redebeitrag von Professor Norbert Pohlmann hier für den Teletrust und bin gespannt, welche Neuigkeiten wir dort noch bekommen.
And I'm also looking forward to the next speech by Professor Norbert Pohlmann here for the Teletrust, and I am curious to see what news we will get there. Exactly as the last speaker. I have no choice but to perhaps refocus on the things that have been said, or perhaps add new aspects. So I'm also very pleased that we have come together here again.
79 Milliarden auf 202 Milliarden gestiegen und genau die Investitionen ja nicht jetzt wirklich wahnsinnig viel, ja, also genau, aber die größte
We've heard the figures before. In the area of cybercrime, losses have risen from 179 billion to 202 billion, and the investment is not really that much. Yes, exactly. But the order of magnitude was 11 decimal points. 1 billion, and we just need to be clear about that again. That's 1/18th. So 1/18th of the damage. Let's invest in IT security. And we simply have to realize that once again. And it is precisely when when I discuss this with the companies that help companies here to become operational again in the event of ransomware attacks, for example, that they actually say, yes, why is this actually happening? Why are people being attacked? Why is the damage happening? And that's just software. It's not being stopped fast enough. They don't have multi-factor authentication or bad passwords. They don't use modern endpoint security. Exactly zero trust paradigms like verify everything, or just minimize via authorization or introduce encryption. It's not happening right now, and we just have to realize that. But what can we learn from the fact that companies are simply not investing in the right IT security systems? And that is the question, why don't you invest in the right IT security systems? You have to say, yes, implementation is also complex. So it's not trivial. We have the problem that you lack IT security experts who can help implement it accordingly. You can only do things together, such as the introduction of email security, for example. You do it together or not at all, because I can't protect myself alone, because it's an infrastructure, and companies often lack motivation because not everyone is attacked, and those that are not attacked cannot realize a return on investment. And that's why I'd like to carry out a thought experiment with you. So let's just think about it carefully. We have an investment of 11.1 billion here, and we would simply double that. We would simply pay twice as much money for IT security, and that would be a good assumption to say. That would reduce the damage by half. So we would only have a loss of 1.1 billion. So I personally believe that we don't need to double it. But now in the thought experiment, that would be the stop. And if we do it this way, then we can say that we have invested 1.1 billion and then have 90 billion.
Dass sich das Geld sofort lohnt. Also genau, das ist nochmal so eine Perspektive, die wir überlegen müssen, das letztendlich.
We could say that this is a profit. So it would make perfect sense if we invested twice as much, because we would reduce the damage so much that the money would immediately pay off. So that's exactly the kind of perspective we need to consider in order to ultimately implement it. So I think it's a really good idea. And if the companies do this together and at the same time, then we will have a much greater impact against the attackers.
Doppelarbeit zu verhindern und halt auch das Problem, dass wir zu wenig IT-Sicherheitsexperten haben, zu reduzieren.
And that's exactly the idea behind CyberNation. And if we now think about a few activities that we could do, setting up such joint competence centers to prevent duplication of work and to reduce the problem of not having enough IT security experts, security management services. You can imagine a whole lot of things, or just implementing this email security together to reduce the phishing problem, but also introducing common technologies, like this multi-factor authentication to enable federations, or to do something targeted against attacks, or to create a common situational picture. We don't have that. We simply have to be clear about that.
Vorgehen ist Dreh- und Angelpunkt, halt eine Erleichterung zu bekommen und deutlich höhere Wirkung gegen die Angriffe zu produzieren. Also das ist ein wichtiger Punkt. Ich möchte noch mal ein anderes Thema ansprechen.
We don't have a common picture of the situation right now, and that would of course help us to see where the attacks are coming from and what we can do together to protect it properly. So more investment and joint action is the linchpin in order to ease the situation and produce a significantly greater effect against the attacks. So that is an important point. I would like to address another topic. Claudia Plattner has also always addressed this, that the topic of cyber dominance, we simply have to realize that we have a challenge there, that we simply have to. We have many things that are offered to us by monopolists, and that we are therefore very dependent on them. And I would like to give you a few examples. Everyday IT solutions such as our watch, our smartphones, our pads, our notebooks, our PCs, or our smart home. Things that we have that are dominated by monopolistic manufacturers. And that is precisely what is incredibly risky, and it's precisely this, when we think about it, that we have monopolistic providers. In principle, they now have the opportunity. For example, they can localize us, i.e. where we are.
Und durch die Update-Möglichkeiten haben sie tatsächlich auch die Möglichkeit, unsere Geräte funktionsuntüchtig zu schalten.
They can also see which applications and devices we are currently using, or they can simply see what we are doing and how we are doing it. And thanks to the update options, they actually have the opportunity to render our devices inoperable. In other words, to simply switch them off. In other words, we have a major risk here that we simply have to discuss. And another increasingly important area is AI services. This means that we are writing more and more personal, but also more and more business-critical data into these AI services and don't even know what happens to it. And there are other aspects. We have large e-commerce platforms. Of course, we have cloud infrastructures that are dominated by other monopolists. We have social media platforms and much more. In other words, we have to think about what we can do. As digitalization progresses, as individuals, as companies, as a society, how we can protect ourselves against it, and there are aspects that we need to discuss. Cyber, security, trustworthiness, and digital sovereignty.
Diese Dominanz etwas besser in den Griff zu kriegen. Das sind Open-Source-Alternativen aufbauen.
And various things will probably be discussed here over the next few days that can help us to get a better grip on this dominance.
Entwickeln lassen, also auch das Geld nutzen, halt hier uns da unabhängig zu generieren.
These are open source, building alternatives, implementing control layers that minimize the risks, but also allowing significantly more IT security to be developed confidently in Germany, i.e. also using the money to become independent here and there. Generate. The last point I would like to mention is the topic of cybernation. Exactly, cybernation. I have the definition here again to clarify for us. A cybernation is a sovereign state that exploits the possibilities and potential of digital technology comprehensively, securely, and trustworthily in terms of economic performance. So we want to be economically efficient. We just want to implement it securely and trustworthily. And exactly what we want to do. We want to minimize the risks, and at Teletask, we have set up a cyber munitions working group that is very active. And we have set up a working group based on the 6 BSI targets on the way to becoming a cyber nation. We have defined our own requirements, and these are 7 central requirements that I would like to briefly mention again here. Politically, this means in particular a clear commitment to IT security. And a holistic view of the IT security architecture, which means that the federal and state governments must make a stronger commitment to IT security and drive forward its implementation and make appropriate investments. Then we have clearly consolidated European IT security legislation for increased legal and investment security, neutral in practice. So we want the laws, but it is just important that we consistently ensure that these laws promote digital technology Sovietanitat in Germany and in the EU, as well as the perception of fundamental rights, so that we also want to use the technologies.
Verborgenen Backdoors oder geschwächte Verschlüsselung widerspricht den staatlichen Auftrag.
The complementation of IT security, i.e. no backdoors or weakened encryption, i.e. the complementation of IT security, the use of hidden backdoors or weakened encryption contradicts the state's mandate. And why? Should we not do it, or should the state not do it? And in doing so, we are also destroying trust in the digital future. Then we have to significantly increase cyber resilience, i.e. promote and demand the expansion of IT security infrastructures for citizens, companies, and administrations. And that is where the Federal Republic of Germany must be a manufacturer. Support the implementation of NIS2 and the Cyber Resilience Act, and specifically promote SMEs and startups to ensure that competitiveness is maintained. And we need a swift implementation of the eIDAS of the secure infrastructure, where we can convert our identity with the eWallet. This is an important point that we need to address, have to deal with. Making targeted use of technological expertise and rebuilding and strengthening a flourishing cyber market in Germany means more and integrally effective IT security technologies made in Germany, made in Europe in their practice, almost. Implementing this means that the federal and state governments must create targeted funding programs for existing companies and startups in order to develop security solutions, set standards, and promote local providers in Germany. That is also an important point. Then we also have digital sovereignty for a value-oriented, secure, and trustworthy digital future. So we only create technologies that we can develop ourselves and that adopt these attributes. And we have to make sure that we achieve this. Strengthen digital sovereignty very strongly. Develop key competencies, reduce dependency, regular specifications, and certification issues for security-critical technologies, so to speak. Defining and implementing, and finally, designing cybersecurity pragmatically means that cybersecurity must be consistently incorporated into the design of new services and architectures. And we need a balance between security and user-friendliness. This demand may sound trivial, but simply needs to be discussed again and implemented accordingly. Exactly. We need digitalization more and more. Ultimately, we need to significantly reduce risk. And that is exactly what companies, organizations, and society as a whole must do. We need to become much more confident, and we need to ensure that we simply reduce the damage together in the spirit of Cyber Nation. That's why it's really important that we're here at ITSA, that we could discuss these issues, and that companies here at ITSA find solutions that they can implement and hopefully be brave enough to do so. Stop. Investments to protect themselves, and every company that protects itself also protects our society. Thank you for your attention.
Verbliebenen Panelisten, stellvertretend für die Joanna, für die Beiträge, die uns, glaube ich, aus unterschiedlichsten Blickwinkeln einen Eindruck geben, über was für ein Thema wir hier auf der ITSA sprechen. Immer relevanter, immer dynamischer, mit immer neuen Facetten, aber doch auch mit Lösungsansätzen.
Many thanks to Professor Pohlmann for his contribution, and also many thanks again to all three remaining panelists on behalf of Joanna for their contributions, which I believe give us an impression of the kind of topic we're talking about here at ITSA from a wide variety of perspectives. Ever more relevant, ever more dynamic, with ever new facets, but also with approaches to solutions. We try to give the whole thing a stage here at ITSA. We want to exchange ideas and find solutions. And I would like to thank all three of you for giving the whole thing the necessary professional weight as partners. We have now all heard the contributions behind us, and now have the opportunity to ask questions from the floor into my colleague's microphone. And as I'm not quite up to date with all the names, perhaps a brief introduction to who the question comes from. Your House of Lemons, CO Magazine, or CO Move Zero Match. Either way, question for Claudia. I would have expected the Cyber Resilience Act to be reviewed at European level, and now you've just said that you've been given the task for Germany. How will you work together with the French, the Italians, and the others? what kind of cooperation is there? As the Cyber Resilience Act is. This is also directly stipulated by EU law, and then it's more or less just a matter of how you implement it locally, so to speak. We become the notifying body in the roles I mentioned earlier. And then?
Gestaltung heißt, die ganzen Standards, die ganzen Regelwerke, die ganzen Anforderungskataloge und so weiter, das passiert alles auf europäischer Ebene. Und dann geht es sozusagen auf der
Market surveillance as well, in any case, but the Cyber Resilience Act is essentially based on European design, i.e. all the standards, all the regulations, all the catalogs of requirements, and so on. It all happens at European level. And then at the national level, so to speak, it's all about that, only in quotation marks. It's going to be a lot of work, but in principle, it's all about that. Implementing it on the ground, so to speak. But the whole set of regulations, and then also the harmonization. That's what's actually happening at European level. And I can definitely say that we will, of course, coordinate with the companies on how we can do this as well and as smoothly as possible. That's one thing, because there's a lot in store for the manufacturers. We will provide support because we also have offers of assistance. And on the other hand, we will also coordinate with our European partners, for example, with the other market surveillance authorities. Hopefully, this will result in the most harmonized implementation possible. But the regulations themselves all come from the EU, so we won't be reinventing them here. Does that help a little? Feel free to ask again. So it's not an issue. Okay, so it can happen that a provider in Italy gets approval, but not here. At this point, it's not so much about approval, but it's actually the case that there is, of course, also a degree of national implementation at this point. And we will still have to shake things up. What that will actually look like in practice. Give us a little more time. The announcement that we really are has only just been made today. Of course, we have already prepared a number of technical issues in the background, and our colleagues are also working intensively on this, especially in the European votes. We will have a lot more to say about this. We have also already gathered a lot of information. There's also a website somewhere. We will also be happy to provide more information. In any case, you can find the relevant information on our website, along with additional information. You'll probably find the answers to the questions there too. The light. Perhaps in that order. I think they were a bit quicker. The gentleman with the gray jacket, and then the gentleman behind him with the next question.
Dann arbeiten die inzwischen sehr arbeitsteilig. Also der eine sucht die Schwachstellen, der andere die kennen wir ja. Und es wäre so wichtig jetzt, wenn wir sagen, wir haben immer noch nicht genug Security-Investitionen, wenn auch wir auf der Verteidigung arbeitsteiliger sein könnten. Also die Idee Kompetenzzentren, dass man sagt, der eine macht das, der andere das, so
Dear Shantshek, my name, if we look at the side of the attackers, we are now working very much on a division of labor. So one is looking for the weak points of the other, we know them, and it would be so important now when we say that we still don't have enough security investments. If we could also have more division of labor on the defense side, i.e. the idea of competence centers, that we say one does this, the other that. Somehow, there are ideas across companies on how to do this in practice. We could, because every company initially thinks that I have to protect myself and the others in my sector, so to speak. Competitions, in other words, that you have more in common, motivated by the fact that the other side does it this way. Yes, I think we're already a bit past that point because cooperation between companies and authorities is increasing significantly. So if you as a company have a reasonable
Was wir feststellen, ist auch, dass die Scheu mittlerweile verloren geht, wenn man einen Cyberangriff gehabt hat.
CISO, then it is well networked with partner companies, and at that point you are often not even competition, but an ally. And there's also a lively exchange with agencies, such as the Office for the Protection of the Constitution and the BSI. What we're also noticing is that people are no longer shy when they have suffered a cyber attack. I mean, they are media representatives. Yes, of course it's embarrassing when you're in the media, so there's a bit of loss of shyness, because nowadays it's really all about how do I get it fixed? How can I straighten it out? Yes, how can I get the business back on track? And then a lot of things fade in the background. So these levels of cooperation are improving significantly. I can't say, you might have to say something, Claudia, or you, Professor Pohlmann, about what level we're already at, but we're talking to each other a lot more. The linking of the goals of Jesus from companies and authorities is much closer, and the competition story is no longer the main point. So the exchange of information is also wonderful. We think of the CSU lines, all kinds of networks that exchange information. For me, it was also a bit more about doing, i.e. finding solutions. Implementing, perhaps jointly commissioning service providers. If I'm a small company now and I'm not interesting enough for a service provider in terms of licensing services, or it's too expensive for me, then it's almost like a cooperative, so you can use solutions together. Exchanging information, yes, but also using solutions together to listen. So I think we still have a long way to go to become really good. Yes, let's say we still don't have a common picture of the situation, and we don't know of any consortia that could develop the things we need together. So we still have real potential. And if we can really realize this potential, if we could really unleash this potential, that would be brilliant. But mine is mine.
Das ist einfach nicht trivial, also weil die alle unterschiedlich denken, unterschiedliche Zeithorizonte haben und dann vielleicht.
My experience is that it's extremely difficult to get companies together and say we'll all throw $1 million into the pot and then we'll develop things together. It's simply not trivial because they all think differently, have different time horizons, and perhaps don't want to develop things together. And then there are still questions. Is that even allowed under antitrust law? But I believe that if we could manage that, we would be much faster. I would like to add one more small point. I also believe that we have already improved significantly in this area, but that we still have a long way to go. But we also need to be very clear for a moment. The value chain of an attack, the kill chain, if you like, is one, in quotation marks, a value stream. The value streams that need to be protected are much more diverse. For a chain, for a process to organize a division of labor. That's even easier than organizing it for a large number of them.
Und meines Erachtens liegen die Chancen an der Stelle in der Digitalisierung, die gerade auch Ralf Wintergerst vorhin deutlich gestresst hat. Und dann kann man nämlich auch so Sachen wie
That briefly describes the theoretical construct, but does not change the fact that we can and must become much better in the division of labor. And in my opinion, the opportunities lie in digitalization, which Ralf Wintergerst also stressed earlier. And then you can also do things like get 5 water suppliers together and run or one. There is end-to-end service, which can be easily integrated into your own value chain. Also much better to realize. So I think the key to a better division of labor at this point also lies in the consumability of corresponding services. And that, in turn, is a sensible digitalization based on modern technologies, on sensible standards in which this is also possible. We have room for improvement, of course, but we're also working on it, like this. I have to try to keep to the order for a moment. The herd just got in touch with the glasses, and then I have the lady in the blue jacket next on the screen.
Dazu gesagt, dass mehr Investitionen gebraucht werden in den cybersecurity-Markt. Da würde ich gerne noch mal ein bisschen.
Benjamin Stiebel from Tejas Spiegel background, you've said a lot about the need for more investment in the cybersecurity market. I would like to follow up on that a little.
Da entsprechende Ökosysteme aufzubauen und so weiter. Wie sieht's jetzt mit Blick auf digitale Souveränität aus?
With regard to the goals behind it, it's certainly an economic advantage to build up corresponding ecosystems and so on. What is the situation now with regard to digital sovereignty? Well, there's a lot of discussion about this in the cloud sector, perhaps also in the telecommunications infrastructure sector. What is the specific situation with IT security products? How important is it to have your own alternatives, or what? It's riskily different. That's why it's important to use products that don't come from Germany or Europe, i.e. in administration. For example, not only German products are used. Is it desirable to add to this in the next few years? Or under what circumstances can you continue to use foreign products? And what difference does it make? Whether they come from Japan, Israel, the USA, or somewhere else. The man should open a big board now. So maybe he should. A brief definition of digital sovereignty is the ability to independently select products, solutions, and services, and to have alternatives. If we look at it from this perspective, and also from a certain reality, the American big tech companies simply have pretty good services, and we simply won't be able to replace them in the next few years. I think we have to be realistic about what has been created over the last 4 decades. We can't catch up in 2 or 3 years, no matter how much we want to. This means that our range of solutions lies in demanding, promoting, and challenging our own solutions more. Also in the area of security. This is of course important if we want to improve our ability to assess. We are completely out of the game. In other words, we need partnerships with these large companies. We need independent offers, but they will not put us in a position of sovereignty such that we It is completely unrealistic that we will be able to replace some companies in the cloud sector relatively quickly. But the combination will be decisive for Germany and also for Europe. The extent to which we manage to develop and promote precisely this performance and also solutions in the security sector. And that will certainly only happen over time. So we have quite a few discussions about why something can happen, but we really need to see when companies look at us. Still need the services of these big tech companies and at the same time. Is the endeavor and talking to each other more intense than ever before? At least what I can say from my Beacon perspective is that German providers are talking to each other much more, where they can cooperate together to create better service offerings. So it's on the. I've never seen so much activity. But I can't give you the figures right now. But I would also like to, that would be an idea for a study. Yes, to create a kind of sovereignty index, and then see where we're making progress and where there's movement. I would also have something to say. I think so. We simply have to realize that most companies don't even have the minimum standard. And they simply have to protect themselves. And now I would say, in terms of priority, it doesn't matter what technologies might not come from Russia or North Korea, but the attackers come from other countries. Then we have the second issue of sovereignty, which is a long-term issue. We have to make sure that we can get out of it in the long term, that we can deal with it in the long term. And that's exactly what working together, open source, joint development is. So there really are a lot of possibilities, but the fact that we don't have the minimum standard today, that we can be attacked today, we have to do that immediately with more money. So we need to counteract this. That's another priority. Yes. Ms. Plattner, would you like to say something about administration? I was just waiting for you to ask again. First of all, I would like to give you a little more encouragement. I think SA here in particular shows that there's also a lot to be said from Germany on the subject of AI.
Eine der Bereiche, in denen wir auch als Nation und auch als Europa wirklich nochmal einen ordentlichen Stich machen können.
Security, and companies that are dedicated to the topic and also have good products. I think the cybersecurity market is one of the areas in which we as a nation and as Europe can really make a real impact. I think that is growth. World in which we can really score well. And I'm delighted that there's also a meeting here with ITSA where we can get something going together. I definitely see this as an area of opportunity, so we'll support it as best we can. We think that's a good start on the subject of administration. I'm certainly not going to get carried away with any statements here.
Optionen haben, dass wir wissen, was wir tun, dass wir entsprechende Sicherheitsniveaus auch sicherstellen können. Und da helfen wir mit. Wir treffen keine Beschaffungsaussagen, das machen andere.
You know that as well as I do. The crucial point for us is that, as the BSI, we want to ensure that we have options in the sense of what you have just defined, that we know what we are doing, that we can also ensure appropriate levels of security. And we help with that. We don't make any. Procurement statements are made by others. We try to provide what is to be procured with appropriate requirements, and then check them accordingly to ensure that safe products are used. That's our job, and we stick to it. Thank you. Next, it was the lady's turn. Exactly. I would schedule one more question after that. I want to look at the clock, and that would be me. Thank you very much for the question. It's along the lines of what I wanted to ask.
Wenn ich höre, dass die deutsche Startup-Szene leidet, dass sie es noch nicht mal aus der Pre-Seed-Runde schaffen in der Regel, dann sehe ich, dass hier auf der ITSA ganz tolle Startup-Preise vergeben werden. Ich höre von
Kirsten Steff from Computing Germany, we are relatively new to the German market. When I hear that the German startup scene is suffering, that they don't even make it out of the pre-seed round, as a rule, then I see that great startup prizes are awarded here at ITSA. I hear from you, Ms. Plattner, that we have to look. What do we have for our own products? And then I hear from you, Mr. Wintergerst, that Cisco and courses are without alternative and see that in critical infrastructures.
Im einzelnen Use Case, wenn ich einen sicheren Datenraum brauche, da brauche ich kein SharePoint. Da gibt's genug deutsche Lösungen.
Even in the German Armed Forces, which has now replaced its entire field communications with Cisco products, where I think to myself that in the individual use case, if I need a secure data room, I don't need SharePoint. There are enough. German environment solutions that I can use that are secure and not as highly vulnerable as Cisco SharePoint, which is also okay, because as widespread as they are, you can find all the weak points there. The other products may have just as much, but either way, how does that fit in with these sovereignty slogans that I've heard here again today? Unfortunately, I can't put it any other way, and then there's no alternative to hire Cisco's. That is not sovereign to me. That's clear to me. Then I have a choice. I can choose Francisco, but for me, that's not what I mean by sovereignty. We have great products in Europe. We have great telesecurity initiatives made in Germany. IT security met in Europe.
Wo ich heute noch weine, dass die sich an den Amerikaner verkaufen mussten, weil sie es im europäischen Markt nicht geschafft haben. Und das wird jedem anderen Unternehmen in Deutschland genauso gehen, wenn weiter so beschafft wird wie der in der Vergangenheit.
They're really great products, but if nobody buys them, then they won't last much longer, because then they will go the way of Hornet Security, where I still cry today that they had to sell out to the Americans because they didn't make it in the European market. And it will be the same for every other company in Germany if they continue to procure in the same way. Back to the past. So how does it fit together? In your view, to position yourself confidently, strengthen your own products, and then only buy big tech again? All good me. I have this discussion very often and with the same intensity. So it's not. So nothing fundamentally new. For me, it is very important at this point, and I've tried to make this clear time and again in many publications, discussions, podcasts, and the like. Need both. There's not just black or white, and there is not just tomorrow we will do everything ourselves or else. We bury our heads in the sand and only buy from others and resign ourselves to our fate. It doesn't work. There is. We need to take a much more differentiated approach to this problem. And also take a much more objective look at the situation. What can we do? What can't we do? How do we need to position ourselves here? And we have always said this as BSI. Are we pursuing a dual strategy here? Or are we trying to promote a dual strategy? On the one hand, this means that we support national European companies with what we, as the BSI, can also contribute when it comes to security issues. We are also campaigning to generate sales there, of course, because without sales they will not be able to survive.
Wir müssen dafür sorgen, dass wir auch Zugang zu Services und Technologien haben, die wir für die Digitalisierung in Deutschland, in Europa brauchen. Und die kommen halt definitiv nicht.
This means actively trying to support these companies also with sales and orders in order to make them big. And on the other hand, we say that we must ensure that we also have access to services and technologies that we need for digitization in Germany and Europe, and that they are coming. Definitely not coming. At the moment, they're only coming from Germany or Europe, but there are also technologies that we need to make available to us from outside. And making them usable for us means from a cybersecurity perspective. We have to ensure that we can use them safely and securely. In other words, we need to have control over what data goes out, from telemetry to user data, i.e. usage and user data. But also when it comes to the question of which control topics come in, which updates come in, which control commands come in, and ideally which ones. Where can the connection to the manufacturer be interrupted if necessary? And yet the service must continue to function. In other words, these are questions that we definitely ask ourselves, and the pitfalls for us in this complex of
nationale, europäische, heimische Produkte stark machen, Hersteller fördern und gleichzeitig andere Technologien von außen für uns sicher nutzbar machen. Das ist die Doppelstrategie, für die wir einstehen und von der wir auch sehr klar sagen, das ist
how do we secure access to foreign technologies and ensure that they can actually be used safely? In other words, a dual strategy of strengthening national European domestic products, promoting manufacturers, and at the same time, making other technologies from abroad safe for us to use. This is the dual strategy that we are advocating, and of which we also say very clearly that it is not one or the other. It is both, and we will not manage without it. Then I'll see when it's put into practice. Thank you at some point. I'll add to that a BICM study that we did on the subject of digital sovereignty, in which 80% of them say that they are now dependent on products from the USA and also from China. They're simply dependent on products that are not so easy to replace one-to-one. I'm not even able to judge what you said about Cisco. There are certainly alternatives, but for now, country where we are, these products have been adopted. They're in use today and are sometimes not so easy to replace. That's always the case in IT operations. If you have an IT run that wants to function properly, you don't necessarily always want to touch a system that is running well. You're happy that it's running properly at all, so that one rail is the second rail. And now I'm putting on a different hat. I also run a company. I know my profit and loss account, and I also know which suppliers are in it, and I also know what annoys me. Where I don't see any big alternatives at the moment, and where I'm stuck with the screw that license payments are being turned up every year. That's why I'm going back to the Bitkom role. An intensified search by companies to find alternatives, and I believe we will see them. I think we'll also see a return to using more European and German products. And this market may also be further stimulated by this discussion. At the moment, I absolutely agree with you. Is it more of a bold discussion with a time lag? We will have mine. Thesis results. And we need them too. Yes.
Nochmal versuchen, die Frage zu beantworten. Also, Claudia, du sagst Doppelstrategie, aber genau in der Umsetzung fehlt es halt. Ja, also sagen wir mal, wir kennen andere Länder.
Yes, I would like to try to answer the question again. So, Claudia, you say dual strategy, but it's the implementation that's lacking.
Den Unternehmen, den mittelständischen Unternehmen Produkte zu kaufen, das findet in Deutschland überhaupt nicht statt. Also sagen wir mal,
Yes, so let's say we know other countries from Israel or America where the state comes and advertises and says, buy Cisco, buy this, and the state helps the companies, the medium-sized companies, to buy products. That doesn't happen at all in Germany. So let's say that's in favor of it. Are we too bad? We don't do that. We don't travel to America. We don't travel to Asia.
Also da ist sicherlich noch viel Luft nach oben und
Don't travel somewhere else and say, these are our startups, these are our SMEs that are really, really good. Buy them, and I think that would, of course, also be a part where we could do much more in terms of sovereignty. So there is certainly still a lot of room for improvement, and strategy doesn't help here. It simply has to be followed by implementation. Looking at the clock, I would like to entrust the gentleman in front with the last question. Achim Kieler, Deutschlandfunk, Ms. Plattner.
Gefährlich doch künstliche Intelligenz für die IT-Sicherheit ist. Andererseits hier auf dieser Messe
we hear a lot about how dangerous artificial intelligence is for IT security. On the other hand, here at this trade fair, actually, there's no product that is advertised as AI-enabled or anything similar. That's my question. In your experience, according to your observations, who uses IT more, the attackers or the defenders? The good guys or the bad guys stop before they answer?
Ist das schon der O-Ton?
Is that already the high? Is that already the O-tone? Good for the topic.
Wer ist schneller? Wer schafft es, KI für sich schneller gut nutzbar zu machen? Und ich plädiere natürlich dafür, dass es die Verteidiger sind, also quasi wir diejenigen, die versuchen, Angriffe abzuwehren. Das betrifft natürlich nicht nur das BSI, wir setzen natürlich auch KI.
We also made it very clear from the start about AI. It will be about exactly the question you just asked. Who is faster? Who will be able to harness AI more quickly? And I would, of course, argue that it is the defenders, i.e. we who are trying to fend off attacks. Of course, this doesn't just apply to the BSI. Of course, we also use AI products, and of course, as you just said, there are a lot of people out there who are doing the same and making use of the possibilities. The attackers are doing the same, and we also see those who use them. So AI has arrived on the market. We can actually see that. However, we are not yet at a point where it is really pervasive everywhere. In other words, we have not yet seen the feared full automation through AI and corresponding attacks. In other words, we still have a good chance of being faster in this respect. And again, it's good that we are at ITSA and are actually seeing companies adopting this, because it really will depend on who is faster. Speed will be the decisive factor. I think we still have a good chance of winning this, and we are already using it in many places. And if we see products out here where that's the case, then that's the way in the right direction. I have hope. That AI will have a very, very positive impact on our business models, and that we can achieve a lot. And I also hope that, at the end of the day, we can gain an advantage there, because we can, are faster.
Problem, dass natürlich, wenn man denkt, was ist KI? KI ist halt aus Daten Wissen generieren, und die Angreifer tauschen ihre Daten aus und können dann besser Wissen generieren. Und wenn wir als Gesellschaft die Bedrohungsinformationen schneller austauschen würden, könnten wir die KI.
I would also like to say something about that. Exactly. I think we have the old problem again that, of course, if you think, what is Kiki, stop generating a bit of data, and the attackers exchange their data and can then generate better knowledge. And if we as a society were to exchange threat information more quickly, we would be able to prevent K much more efficiently. So here we also have another structural problem in that cooperation is not yet so good that we can access all the data. Thank you very much. Thanks to all the panelists. Thanks also to you are welcome to use the drinks and snacks that are still available for a further exchange. Nice to have you here, and hopefully many more inspiring moments at SA.